one of the more grotesque books I've ever read. A totally well-adjusted woman in her pajamas on the internet. I'm all about witchy horror. People on the internet do not like this book. Proceed with caution. Are you gonna kill me? My mind was just so blown. I got some stuff that you might like. Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I thought it would be fun to give you some recommendations for spooky season. So I know that not all readers enjoy reading horror. So basically book number 1 is going to be not scary at all. It's actually a children's book, but it still has the Halloween vibes. And then as we progress through the books, they're going to be getting increasingly scary. Yeah, so I have my Halloween pajamas, my skeleton earrings, my most autumnal makeup, and an iced latte I made at home, even though I desperately wanted to go to Dunkin' Donuts. So I think we're ready. So book number 1, as I already alluded to, is the least scary on this list. It is actually a children's book, and that is The Halloween House by Erica Silverman. This is one of the first books I have a memory of reading or having read to me. Basically, this is about 2 convicts who escape jail, and they seek refuge in this house that they come to find out is haunted by some little Halloween spirits. The illustrations are done by John Agee, and the illustrations just add so much to it. It's like you're getting introduced to all these different monsters in the house, but I just think it's so cute, and it definitely gets you into the season. So this would be a really great one to read to your kids to get them into the Halloween spirit, as long as you're okay with them turning out, like me, a totally well-adjusted woman in her pajamas on the internet. Or if you are just someone who enjoys children's books, you could read this. Okay, next is one that you've probably already seen, so I almost didn't want to put this on the list. Everybody on the planet has heard of it, but if you are by some chance someone who has not yet heard of this book, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So these stories are collected from folklore and retold by Alvin Schwartz. And I think that the drawings have sort of even become more famous than the stories themselves, the drawings by Stephen Gammell. Children's stories, but that's is that for kids? Maybe up for debate. This had a pretty big impact on how it turned out today. Stephen Gammell, probably part of the reason I'm in therapy today. In a fun way, I guess. So yeah, this is just short story anthologies about creepy stuff happening, and they are allegedly for kids. More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is the sequel, and then Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. I recommend all of those for sure. And then next is a book that isn't technically horror, but I wanted to include it because it is a graphic novel, and although it's not marketed as horror, the drawing style is kind of a little spooky, so it might still be a good one to read to get you into the spirit. And that is The Black Project by Gareth Brooks. So this is one that is about just getting into high school age boy who is feeling really lonely, and he decides to build himself a girlfriend. Definitely not marketed as a horror necessarily, but some of the drawings are just a little spooky. Instead of being drawn in traditional ways, the author actually embroidered the majority of the art in this book, and then you can see that the text bubbles look like they're all handwritten by the author. It might still be a good one for people who don't normally enjoy horror but are still wanting something to get in the spirit. And next is one that is another children's book, and that is Clockwork by Philip Pullman. A lot of this takes place in the winter time as well, so this would also be a good one to read in the winter if you are a really seasonal reader. So this follows a few different characters, and then as you get to know them and their stories more and more, their stories begin to intertwine in really interesting ways. This one also has illustrations, and they are just really eerie and I think really add a lot to the story. This story has a lot of tension and suspense, and I would say horror would be a great option for people who are not ones who normally love horror but are wanting to kind of get more into it. Okay, and then next is another graphic novel, or it's technically a novel, but there's quite a few illustrations in it. And this is a young adult, and this is one I've talked about a couple times kind of recently, but that is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. It's illustrated by Jim Kay. So this is about a boy who is approached by a monster at his bedroom window one night, and the monster says, "I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and then when I'm done, you have to tell me your story or your truth." And this is really an exploration of grief and dealing with some difficult family issues. Illustrations themselves would definitely, I think, get a reader into the mood for the Halloween season. So this was more sad than it was scary, but the illustrations are just really hauntingly beautiful. I would just recommend this for any time of year, but especially for the spooky season. The next one I would like to recommend is House of Hollow by Krystal Sutherland. So this is about a high school age girl. So she and her sisters actually went missing for about a month when they were kids, and they mysteriously returned with no memory of where they were, and it was never figured out what actually like happened to them when they were gone. And ever since then, they've always just felt really like outcasts and like they just really don't fit in. The oldest sister goes missing, and our main character Iris has to basically uncover the mystery of what happened to them as kids in order to figure out where her sister went missing to now in present day, because the way that she disappeared was under similar circumstances. This does have some romance subplots as well, so if that's something you enjoy, you would probably like this. The bonds of sisterhood, navigating a world where you feel like you're not fitting in. Yeah, just darker themes in general. I think you should check this out. Okay, next is another young adult horror. This is like young adult witchy horror. I'm all about witchy horror. It's Extasia by Claire Legrand. So basically this is about a girl who is ordained as a saint in her village, old-timey village, you know, like we hate women and women are the source of all evil type of thing. And she's just like drinking the Kool-Aid. She's like, yep, women suck, a lot of internalized misogyny. And then all of these men start getting killed in the village. And she has to figure out, okay, what's happening to the men? What can I do to stop it? What can I do to save my village from this curse that is plaguing it? There's some witchy stuff. So this was like a mixture between The Witch, The Village, and Silent Hill, the movie. I would say if you enjoy any of those, you would probably enjoy this, but if you enjoy all of those, you would especially enjoy this. I think this would definitely be a suitable one for people who don't normally like horror but are wanting to get more into it. Okay, next is another one that's sort of like in the same vein in that it's like takes place in an old-timey village and is about witchy shit, and that is Slewfoot by Brom. I actually just read this in my 24-hour readathon vlog. Had a whale of a time because it is awesome. Connecticut, 1666. An ancient spirit awakens in a dark wood. The wild folk call him Father, Slayer, Protector. The colonists call him Slewfoot, demon, devil. To Abatha, a recently widowed outcast, alone and vulnerable in her pious village, he is the only one she can turn to for help. Together they ignite a battle between pagan and Puritan, one that threatens to destroy the entire village, leaving nothing but ashes and bloodshed in its wake. If it is a devil you seek, then it is a devil you shall have. Yeah. If that sounds good to you, jump on this. So the next book is more literary horror, so it feels a lot more like a fever dream, and that is Bunny by Mona Awad. So this is about a woman who is in an MFA program. Her classmates are these like really twee, cliquey girls who refer to each other and themselves as Bunny. As the story progresses, she's sort of drawn into their circle of friends, and the closer she gets to them, the more it feels like a fever dream. What is happening? Is our narrator unreliable? Is she on drugs? Is she mentally ill? Are these girls actually doing what she's saying they're doing? A really great one, especially if you like, again, that very like surreal horror, reality bending type stuff. Next is a book that recently got translated into English. We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Bervutz. A lot of people on the internet do not like this book. So this is about a woman who takes a job as a content moderator for a big social media platform. So she basically has to be the person to watch or like screen all of the content that people are trying to post onto this platform. Yes, this is okay to be posted, or like, no, this is a video of someone being beheaded. Of course this can't be posted, you know? That of course is something that would weigh pretty heavily on someone's psyche. I already talked about in my August wrap up about why I liked it and why I think some people didn't like it. So if you're more interested in my analysis of that, you could go to that wrap up and watch that. This is another definitely more psychological horror. A lot of the quote unquote less scary books that I've included in this list are going to be psychological because that's not a subgenre that really freaks me out that much. And I think that that's one that's a lot more approachable for people who are just getting into it and are trying to ease into it. I really enjoyed this because this book really focused on a small group of characters rather than focusing on the disturbing content that they're having to moderate. It more so focuses on the effects that this content is having on our small group of characters, and specifically our main character. It's a pretty short one, so especially if you are just wanting to cram in a couple spooky-ish type books for the month of October, I think this would be a great choice. Okay, the next two are technically marketed as thrillers, but they are definitely darker thrillers. So the first one I don't have a physical copy of yet, but that is Baby Teeth by Zoe Stage. This is basically told from the perspective of a mother and a young daughter. It's like this woman is struggling with motherhood, but specifically struggling because she kind of feels like her daughter is like a little bit evil. she's trying to like reconcile her feelings of like, I love you because you're my daughter, but also like, are you gonna kill me? But especially if you enjoyed the movie Orphan, I would highly recommend this. I think you would really like this, and this was just a lot of fun. And then next, again, is another thriller, but it's probably one of the darkest and most graphic thrillers I've ever read, but that is Pretty Girls by Karin Slaughter. This one is a wild ride. Our main character, Claire, she had a sister go missing, and now her husband is killed, and then she kind of uncovers something about her husband. The whole novel is her having to figure out like, what was he really involved in? Who really is my husband? Is there any connection to how my sister went missing? Oh boy, this was pretty graphic. If you're a thriller girly, definitely read this one. It's good. Okay, next is another kind of psychological / maybe supernatural horror, Come Closer by Sarah Gran. So this novel is about a woman who kind of starts to behave erratically. She has these like outbursts, swearing and violence. Basically, you as the reader are trying to figure out like, is she just going insane or is she actually possessed? Okay, so here's a little excerpt from it that I think kind of illustrates and kind of encompasses the story pretty well. Soon I didn't have a moment alone. When she wasn't inside me, I could see her scurrying around, looking over my shoulder, ready to jump in if necessary. In the apartment, I would see a lock of dirty black hair or a small white foot hiding in the shadows out of the corner of my eye. At the office, I would catch sight of her hand, with its long, unpolished nails scribbling alterations over my designs. Blackouts became common. 10 minutes on the way home from work, an hour, then 2 or 3, then whole days. Most of the time I was in between the two extremes. I would start a thought. I really ought to let this person merge in front of me. And she would finish it. But why should I? I would scream and cry and beg and fight every way I could imagine. But she would always win. She was stronger, and so she always won. Yup, that sounds good. I really enjoyed this one. This is another really short one, so this would be great for if you're just trying to get a few quick little spooky reads in for the season. Okay, next we have Your House is on Fire, Your Children All Gone by Stefan Kisby. The cover is just like super creepy. Shirley Jackson meets the Twilight Zone in this riveting novel of supernatural horror. A village on the Devil's Moor, a place untouched by time and shrouded in superstition. The small pub whose regulars talk of revenants. The old mill no one dares to mention. This is where 4 young friends come of age, in an atmosphere thick with fear and suspicion. Their innocent games soon bring them face to face with the village's darkest secrets in this eerily dispassionate, astonishingly assured novel, evocative of Stephen King's classic short story, Children of the Corn, and infused with the spirit of the Brothers Grimm. This was very creepy. There's just like such a nonchalance to violence and all of these awful things being done to people. So it switches perspectives between the 4 friends that were mentioned. You're kind of just given like random little stories from their perspective as they were growing up, their coming of age experience. Definitely very spooky, very fall vibes. You should check it out. Next is another psychological horror one. That is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. So this is about a main character, Irina, who is put on sabbatical from her bar job. She's offered a show at this gallery. Her photography focuses on taking explicit photographs of men that she kind of finds on the street and recruits. The whole story kind of is following her going on this like tailspin. The book really focuses on her relationship with her obsessive best friend and this young man who works at her local supermarket who she recruits to be a model for her. This is another one that kind of feels like a fever dream in some parts. If you are a type of person who enjoys literary stuff, you like psychological horror, you enjoy female protagonists, especially like unhinged female protagonists, you would definitely enjoy this one. Next is a manga, so I had to refrain from putting too much manga on here because I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it is mine. So the first one I would like to suggest is ゚ Holograph by Inio Asano. This is one I talked about in my best books of 2022, so that probably gives you a hint of how much I really enjoyed this one. Butterflies ominously proliferate as children whisper rumors of a mysterious creature lurking in the tunnel behind the school. To appease its wrath, they decide to offer it a sacrifice, a human one. But this is only the beginning of ゚ Holograph, which takes place in 2 separate timelines. So basically there's like a bunch of different characters in these 2 different timelines. we switch back and forth between like when they were school age kids and like now that they're adults. 10 years later, all will have to face what they've done or suffered through and maybe the end of the world. So this is one where I read it and I was like, my mind was just so blown. I had to like sit and stare at a wall for like 10 minutes after. I just couldn't believe how amazingly this was written. This is very David Lynchian. If you like David Lynch's storytelling and types of stories, I highly recommend this one. There is some, you know, some violent killings. There is some sexual violence. But for me, what I think was the most haunting was just the way that the author is able to depict human emotion. The composition of his pages is just mind-blowing. But also there's so many parts of this that are just straight up beautiful. Like, how in the heck does he do that? Haunting, psychological, gorgeous. I highly recommend this one. Next is one that I don't think I've talked about on my channel yet, but it is one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. So a class of junior high school students is taken to a deserted island where, as part of a ruthless authoritarian program, they are provided arms and forced to kill one another until one survivor is left standing. I think where this definitely crosses the line into horror is the really graphic depictions of violence. There's 42 students. They give you like a class roster of all the different students. So that if there's 42 students and then only one can live, that's a lot of deaths that you're gonna have to read about. I loved this, but this is a chonker. She's a thickie. She's got a little bit more to love, okay? And I know it's gonna maybe be intimidating that it's not only a longer book, but then there's also like 42 freaking students you have to keep track of, but I think you should at least try it. It is a classique and it is just so good. Next is another one by a Japanese author, and that is In the Miso Soup by Ryo Murakami. This was about a Japanese tour guide, and he specializes in like sex tourism. So he will take tourists on guided excursions through the red light district of Japan or of Tokyo. He has this one client who claims to be an American named Frank. Something's not really right with this guy. He's like kind of creepy, kind of creeping me out. The book progresses with the tour guide taking Frank to these different bars and clubs, the rising tension, what's gonna happen, what is Frank gonna do, basically. I think that this would be actually kind of a good place to start if you're wanting to get not only into more horror, but into more like international type horror. It was really thought-provoking too. So, you know, a lot of horror, especially a lot of modern horror, is written in such a simplistic way that it doesn't feel as engaging, but this was written in a way that it was very thought-provoking. Yeah, I recommend it. Next is another manga, but whereas Nijigahara Holograph was a standalone book, this is a series that I'm actively collecting, and that is Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. I've talked about this, I think, in a couple of my haul videos, but I've never really actually like in detail talked about this series. So this is about a young boy who is sort of navigating the growing pains of coming of age. In the first book of this series, he and his family and, you know, aunts and uncles and cousins go on a hiking trip. Tragedy strikes and his cousin actually gets really hurt. And this event really affects his relationship with his mother, his relationship with himself. The rest of the story basically is just like the butterfly effect of that singular event, and specifically really focusing on the psyche of our main character and his relationship with his mom. If you have read any Shuzo Oshimi, you know he is a master at capturing human emotion. I just feel like I could look at his drawings all day. So unsettling. Your family, especially your parents, are the people who are supposed to teach you kind of like what's normal, what's right, what's wrong. So when you have a parent who is an unreliable moral compass, it could really affect you, I would say. The close-ups of the faces that he draws are just so, like, I could just look at them all day. They're just so beautiful. And there's just like so much emotion drawn into them. There are also a lot of these sequences where there's like nothing really being said, but it's just like these drawn out movements and like slowly turning their heads. And I think that is so effective at building the tension. Oh frick, what's gonna happen? So here's an example of that. It's just like hand on the shoulder. You can't see her face. makes her seem so unpredictable. And like, what is she gonna do? What is she capable of? It's like creepy, creepy, creepy. Hoo hoo hoo, yeah. That's the creepy stuff that I like. It's getting my heart racing. So yeah, read it and tell me if you like it. Next is one that has been talked about quite a bit on the internet. Pen Pal by Dathan Auerbach. Our narrator is now grown up and he's looking back on things that happened in his childhood. And now that he has the hindsight, he's like, ooh, that was pretty muffed up. That was pretty creepy. That was not okay. In an attempt to make sense of his own mysterious and unsettling childhood memories, a man begins to reconstruct his past. As the games and adventures of his youth become engulfed by a larger story, he finds that it forms a tapestry of unbelievable horror that he never could have expected. Each chapter completes a different piece of the puzzle for both you and the narrator, and by the end of it all, you will wish that you could forget what he never knew. It definitely has creepypasta vibes. This was very eerie, very disturbing because usually protagonists of horror are not this young. The story starts out and he's like in kindergarten and there's already like creepy stuff happening to him. So pretty freaky, love it, very spooky, you should read it. Next is one that I actually just read in September, I think. That is Anybody Home by Michael Seidlinger. So this is home invasion horror. From the perspective of the home invaders, a group of people they contract these people to invade homes, record it, and they get sold the video. Very like snuff film type stuff. But we're reading from the perspective of someone who's like a new home invader, I guess. And this is his first home invasion. I would say if you're interested in home invasion horror, you enjoyed the movies like The Strangers, Funny Games, I think you would really enjoy this one. Next is another kind of technically home invasion horror, The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. So if you're trying to decide between reading Head Full of Ghosts or Cabin at the End of the World, I would read this one. I didn't like Head Full of Ghosts as much. This is about a pair of husbands who are at this remote cabin with their daughter, Wen. They are visited by a ragtag group of people with these strange weapons, claiming that the apocalypse is upon them, and the only way to stop it is for this family to make a sacrifice. So they have to kill one of the three in order to stave off the apocalypse. It's also kind of like psychological horror because the whole time you're questioning, the whole time you're like, these guys must be crazy, right? Like there's no way the apocalypse is actually happening. These are just like some religious cult freaks or something. But then as the story progresses, wait, is the apocalypse actually happening? I love when books make me question reality and make me unsure of what's really happening. Highly recommend this one. So the next one is The Ruins by Scott Smith. This is more of a vacation survival horror. A group of teens, college students maybe, are on a trip to Mexico when they decide to go on a tour of some Mayan ruins, but it's not like an actual tour. It's just like, oh, this random stranger we met at our hotel knows someone who's on an archaeological dig at these Mayan ruins, and we think it's a good idea to go. Spoiler alert, it's not. The, I guess, like villain or antagonist in this is really interesting to me. There aren't actual chapters. Each new paragraph, we're switching perspective between our group of people who are trying to survive. There's just a lot of tension being built up. You can tell that they're freaking out and they're like horrified by something. They're just reacting and you're seeing them react. So that's making you freaked out. And then you go to the next person and then they're like, oh yeah, this person's dead now. And you're just like, what the heck is going on? So anyway, that's my long way of saying I think you should read The Ruins by Scott Smith and tell me if you like it. Okay, next is another horror. This is one by an Argentinian author that was recently translated into English. Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Basterrica, translated by Sarah Moses. A virus or some sort of plague has contaminated all animals, so humans can no longer eat animal meat. The government legalizes cannibalism. So now there are programs in place where they specifically breed humans for consumption. Our main character is someone who used to work in slaughterhouses back before the plague hit, and he has since transitioned to working at slaughterhouses which slaughter humans. This was pretty disturbing, stomach churning, and there honestly weren't even that many scenes of graphic descriptions of cannibalism or anything. It was just so disturbing that people were so accepting of this being the new status quo. I remember I stayed up really late reading this, and I had to stop reading because it just got to a point where I was like, I think I need a break from this book. Yeah. yep, I think it's time to go to bed. And then I went to bed and had some really weird dreams. Like, couldn't sleep very well. I think this book gave me nightmares. And like the ending really got me. This was good. And so I think you should read it. Read it, okay? Okay, next, another manga series, but it's a short one. So that is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This town is cursed by a spiral, and the way that it manifests and plays out is just so, it makes so much sense, and it's just so creepy. Yes, I have the 3, oh my god, I just hit myself in the face. So I read this when I was like in middle school. This informed my taste so much, was just so formative for me as not only a reader, but just like a horror lover. This is my all-time favorite Junji Ito. I have 2 tattoos from this story. I would say even if you're not normally a manga reader, if you are a horror lover, you gotta read this. You have to. I'm telling you, you have to read this. The art is so well made. The story is so thought-provoking. It's kind of like this whole town going crazy, being driven mad by the spiral in all of the different ways that a spiral can possibly manifest. As always with Junji Ito, there's a lot of great body horror. So if you're a body horror lover, just so many iconic images. I just love the sense of hopelessness that his stories have too. Like, once you've realized something weird is happening, it's already too late. You're stuck. There's no escaping. And I love horror like that. I will never stop recommending it. Okay, the next 3 are definitely more intense. You gotta have a strong stomach for these. So the next one is The Troop by Nick Cutter. This is compared to Lord of the Flies, basically a Boy Scout troop go camping on this remote island, and a stranger stumbles into their campsite. Their idyllic weekend away descends into chaos from there. A lot of body horror in this, gore, pretty graphic, but pretty good. Take that as you will, but I think you should read it. Next is a manhwa by a Korean author who goes by the name of Koogi, and that is Killing Stalking. I also talked about this in my best books of 2022 so far video. This is about a man named Yoon Bum who has a crush on a guy named Sang-woo. He decides to break into his house one day because he is stalking him. And upon breaking into his house, he realizes that Sang-woo is not the perfect guy he always envisioned him to be. I think this cover encapsulates the art really well. It, you know, the implication of violence is pretty accurate, but this is very extreme. There are very graphic depictions of violence. So I think that's why I've sort of like put this so far at the end. But the art is so well done. I'm trying to like find a page that I can show you, but it's just like, there really aren't many I can show you on the internet without getting demonetized. Yep, I can't really show you anything because it's all too graphic and violent, but this was really good. I read this all online on Lᵒᵶ Comics. So the series is completed. So yeah, I like binged the entire series over the course of like 48 hours, and it is so good, so addicting, but very extreme. So proceed with caution. Okay, and then the last one is another one that I just finished reading. I actually finished this, or like read this almost in its entirety on an airplane. And I kind of feel bad for the other passengers who were like kind of like within eyesight of me, because I was unwell while I was reading this. They probably thought I was a freaking flight risk or something, because I just could not contain my emotions. It was just very shocking. And this was not one I would recommend reading on an airplane. But that is The Laws of the Skies by Gregoire Courtois. This is another one that's really similar to The Troop and really similar to The Lord of the Flies. It's a class of 6-year-olds. So a class of 6-year-olds head into the forest for a camping trip. And this was extremely graphic. It was to the point where, you know, going in, I've read Lord of the Flies, I've read The Troop, I'm good. You know, I got it. And then as it started, I was like, yep, okay, And then it kept going, and I was like, okay, yep, I got it. By the time I was 3/4 of the way through it, I was like, okay, this is it. Like, we've already reached the peak of how bad it could get. Nope. Because then we got to the end, and I was like, I thought I got it, but I didn't. I didn't get it. And I wasn't prepared. My brain, what the fuck? You should check out this and read about 6-year-olds getting murdered in a forest. That doesn't sound good when I say it out loud, but This is why my mom asks me if I have trouble sleeping at night, but I don't. I don't know what that says about me, but you should read The Laws of the Skies if you enjoy extreme horror and or you want to try reading some extreme horror. So here's the full stack. Even if you don't like horror, I think that I included some recs that would be good for some non-horror peeps. So whether you are a child or an adult who doesn't enjoy horror that much but likes darker themes, or you're a crazy biatch like me and likes extreme, gory, graphic violence, I got some stuff that you might like in this stack. God, I'm like out of breath from lifting all of those. Jeez-a-loo. Okay, thanks so much for watching, and I hope I was able to recommend something that you will like. Read some of these and then let me know if you like them. Watch my other videos if you want, subscribe if you want, like this video, do whatever you want. But if you want to stick around, I would love to have you. Happy reading, and I hope you see a super scary skeleton this Halloween season. That's my wish for you. Okay, love you, bye!